Ian, talk to us a little bit about what we've learned in the past year about deterrence in this space, because as Anne points out, the early attacks in Ukraine were cyber. They were then followed by kinetic attacks through the way. We've seen in the United States an extraordinary and somewhat sophisticated approach by the Chinese to get into Chinese intelligence, to get into the telecom systems so deeply that they were able to hear conversations, we're not entirely sure how much they listened to, from President Trump and Vice President Vance. They were able to get into systems that U.S. law enforcement uses to tap the phones of suspected criminals. It was a pretty big breach. And yet, it doesn't seem like we've got a working theory of deterrence here.
Well, I mean, there was deterrence, of course, against Russian cyber attacks for a brief period of time after Biden met with Putin, and they hadn't met before, president to president.
That was 2021.
That was 2021. I think June or July. It was in Geneva.
That's right.
Not far from here. Right. And they didn't talk much about Ukraine, but they talked a lot about cyber because it was right after the Colonial Pipeline hit. And Biden made it very clear in that meeting that that was a red line. And if there were critical infrastructure attacks by Russians going forward, that the Russians were going to pay for it. And we absolutely saw that the Russians, sort of pulled back as a consequence of that. Now, that lasted until it didn't. And when the Russians decide they're going to invade a sovereign country, after Putin directly met with other world leaders, European leaders, and bald-facedly lied and said, no, we have absolutely no plans to invade, and then he invades, all bets are off. And if the GZERO world is winning, one of the things that's also winning is impunity. One of the things that's also winning is a failure of deterrence. And if the North Koreans have a defensive alliance with Russia and they're sending 15,000 troops to the front lines inside Russia to fight the Ukrainians, well, I mean, they're not going to be as easily deterred either. Now, I do think that with Iran, who recognize, I mean, they're the ones that have lost in all of this. Of the four that you've mentioned, the rogues that are causing most of the cyber concerns, the Iranians have lost their empire by proxy across the Middle East. And they've lost it because the Israelis, with American support, have shown that they have escalation dominance in the region. And also because Assad had a kleptocratic and brutally brittle regime that fell domestically. So if you're Iran right now, maybe you can talk about going dashing to a nuclear weapon. You know you're going to get hit if that happens. But the idea that you can act with impunity compared to 6 months ago, 12 months ago, has been really wiped off the agenda. But that's hard power, and that's not credibility of international actors around the world.